Good morning. Well, we keep looking at these rules that God has given us. The next one, of course, is you shall not murder. Well, it's obvious, isn't it? It's an obvious rule. But let's look back again into the rules that Moses gave to the people. For you see, murder is one thing, but in fact, what we would normally call manslaughter is another. In other words, people can get killed. Killed because of things that we do wrong and mistakes that we make. And there was a regulation that said to the people that if somebody was killed in this particular way, then the person who had carried out the act should try to flee to a city of refuge. These were cities set up throughout the country. When a person was killed in this way, his next of kin, the nearest relative, was supposed to seek out the person who had caused the death and carry out vengeance against that person. He was supposed to bring that person to trial, and because he had taken a life, he was expected to have his life taken if he killed in this way. But when it happened as an accident, the same rules applied. But the person who had carried out the killing would immediately drop everything, gather some of his possessions, and flee quickly to a city of refuge. When he came to the city of refuge, he would go to the elders of that particular city, and he would say to them, I was working with this man, I was doing something with him, something went wrong, and I killed the man. It was an accident. The magistrates in that city would examine exactly what had happened. And having examined what had happened, if they decided it was an accident, the man was told quite simply, you may stay in this city, and the person who is seeking your blood, the avenger of blood, will not be allowed to touch you, but you must stay in this city until the death of the high priest in office at this time. And then you'll be able to return to your family. In other words, they gave him refuge because it had been an accident. Murder, in a sense, has got to be a deliberate act. And in the Old Testament, from the time of Moses on, it was said that when this act took place, then the person who had carried it out should lose his own life. When you shed the blood of another deliberately in this way, not by accident, but deliberately in the act of murder, then your life should be forfeited for it. Now, we are 3,500 years on from these rules being given. And in our present society, well, we've become very tolerant. And we said to people, if this murder takes place, then the people must be in prison, yes, for a certain length of time. But if they can be reformed, then they are let out of prison on license to come back again into the society. This is the society we are living in. And I'm proud to be living in a society like this. It isn't that we're going against God's rules, but we're saying quite simply that humanity is feeble and it is weak and it will do things which is bad for it. But we should not take vengeance by taking an eye for an eye or a tooth for a tooth or even a life for a life. But we should separate them from society and keep them separated from society until such a time as once again they're able to be released to come back into society. Some, of course, are put away for life because what they've done is so horrific. But there are times as well when even these can show reform, and even these must be given parole and allowed to come back out and continue with their lives again. And you know, the punishment is quite severe. I had a young man who committed a murder in one of the parishes where I was living. Happened in a chip shop of all places, you know. He went along and in the queue in the chip shop, he argued with another man in the queue. And he went home, got a knife, came back and killed him there and then in the chip shop. It was a deliberate act of anger in that particular situation. And people said, you know, having done that, he was just sent away to prison. But you know, when he did it, he was a young man of 20 with the whole of his life ahead of him. 20 years later, I think he was released, perhaps about 20 years later. All those years of his life, the years when he should have probably been married and brought up children and done all the things that a young man would have done between the ages of 20 and 40 years of age. He lost so much. So in a sense, it is a great punishment. But we no longer, at least in our nation, take a life for a life. You shall not do murder is one of the main statutes of our society. But at the same time, we actually accept the fact that when it happens, we must forgive. We must punish. We must control it. But in the end, we do not take a life back from it. You shall do no murder. One of the fundamental rules of our society. And it's something which affects us from the very weakest to the very greatest. Even governments cannot do murder. Not even if it is for the good of society. We cannot do murder. This is the rules which govern our lives. Amen.